Welcome to this episode of Intellectual Conservatism. Today I'm here with Gaven Kerr and Joe Schmid. So obviously everyone's really excited to see both of these even Joe, you kind of came on the scene and you've kind of been surprising everybody with just your philosophical expertise. And Gaven obviously has recently published, I think, 2 books, right? The Metaphysics of Creation and Aquinas' Way to God. So both of these guys are just really exciting thinkers in their field. So I'll have both of them just introduce themselves really quick. So let's start with Gaven, then we'll go to Joe.
So I'm Gaven. I'm a married father of 3, third order Dominican from Belfast in Northern Ireland. I teach philosophy at St. Patrick's College, Maynooth. I've published a few things just on Thomism and in philosophy in general. So there's the 2015 book on the Ante Argument, the 2019 book on creation. Got another manuscript that I've just completed, which is in submission, and I'm working on a book on the resurrection at the minute.
Wow.
Other than that, my research interests are in ancient medieval philosophy, foundations of analytic philosophy, logic, philosophical logic, metaphysics, epistemology, and lately I'm sort of getting into moral theory, ethics, and stuff like that, really because I have to teach courses on the stuff, so I should learn something about it. Yeah, but that's me.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, I'm Joe Schmid. I have a YouTube channel called Majesty of Reason. I study philosophy at Purdue University. And I also want to thank you for having me on. And I'm a huge fan of Gaven. I'm an even bigger fan of his accent. So, but yeah. So I guess I should say some of my research interests. Basically, really interested in the metaphysics of persistence. Explanations of what persistence, first of all, what it is, whether in endurantist or perdurantist terms, and also, what explains why things persist. So that's one of them. And then another one is like models of God and conceptions of ultimate reality. That's another area. And then some other areas like causal finitism and things like that. So.
All right. Well, let's just dive right into the conversation then. So the conversation today is focusing on the Ante Argument. Gaven, let's have you begin by just presenting the argument to us and its background, and then we'll maybe have Joe present how he understands the argument.
Yeah, cool, no problem. Yeah, so the Ante Argument, that refers to an argument from Aquinas' early work, the Ente Essentia, which he wrote when he was in his early 30s. And in chapter 4 of that work, it was presented as a kind of a textbook on metaphysics for some of his brothers at St. Jack who didn't understand metaphysics. And he writes this work, and in chapter 4 of it, he's dealing with an issue with regard to separate immaterial creatures, angels in Christian theology, or in Neoplatonic philosophy, the separate substances. And the question is whether or not these things would be pure actuality, or do they have some potentiality to them? Now, there was a position which was adopted known as universal hylomorphism. And universal hylomorphism was basically the view that anything other than God that exists is composed of matter and form. And so the question is, well, what about immaterial creatures? Are they composed of matter and form? And the universal hylomorphist said that, well, look, they do have matter. Immaterial creatures do have matter. It's just not corporeal matter. It's incorporeal matter. And that's how they're distinguished from God. But in chapter 4, St. Thomas really just thinks, no, I mean, that's a bit ad hoc. You can't do that. You kind of need to think things through. Either say that they are pure actuality and we've got a problem here, or, give some sort of an account of things which allows us to say that immaterial things have some element of potency. And that's where this famous distinction of essence and existence comes up. So Aquinas argues for a distinction of essence and existence in the Ente chapter 4. And what he argues is that, I'll not go through the actual argument for it, we can get into that if you want. But what it turns out is that in things which are such that they're capable of multiplication, there's a distinction between what they are, their essence, and the act of existence, or esse. So, and this distinction isn't a distinction of things, of 2 distinct things. Later, Giles of Rome adopted this view that essence and esse are 2 distinct things in creatures. That's not Thomas's view. So essence and existence are related as act and potency, potency and act in creatures. And esse is the principle of actuality by which the creature is. Esse isn't an accident of the thing. We'll probably get into that a wee bit later, but esse isn't an accident of the thing, nor is it accidental to the thing, nor is it predicated accidentally of the thing. That was the Avicennian view. Thomas specifically rejects that in his commentary in the Metaphysics, Book 4, Lecture 1, where he specifically says it's not, esse is not spoken of or predicated accidentally of the thing. So he's very keen to reject that idea that esse is separate from essence in being distinct, and that it's an accident or predicated accidentally. With that context in place, then, Aquinas gets on to this argument for the existence of God, which I defended in the 2015 book. And the argument is very straightforward. It goes as follows. So he considers, or he says, look, whatever belongs to a thing, it either is caused by the principles of the thing's nature. So if you have something belonging to a thing, some sort of distinct property belonging to a thing, that property is either caused by the principles of the nature of the thing, and he gives the example of risibility in a man. So a man is capable of laughter because of his intrinsic principles, that is, the principles of his essence, his matter and form. So in being a rational animal, a man is able to laugh, is able to kind of, see a punchline of a joke, see something that's funny, and engage in laughter. Or if we have some sort of distinct property, it comes from an extrinsic principle, and he gives the example of light in the air or in the atmosphere from the influence of the sun. So that's the first premise of the argument, that whatever belongs to a thing is caused either by the principles of its nature or from some sort of extrinsic principle. Now, given a distinction between essence and esse that he just established prior to this argument, he argues that esse itself can't be caused by the form or the quiddity or the essence of the thing. And he means in the sense of an efficient cause, because Thomas argues that then would mean that the thing would be its own cause and would bring itself into being. In other words, if we go back to that first premise, that if you have a distinct property of the thing caused by the principles of its nature, okay, caused by its intrinsic principles, if esse were like that, like risibility or laughter, the capability of laughing in a man, then you would have the thing preceding itself in existence, from which existence is derived, in the way that the man precedes, logically speaking, precedes his ability to laugh. His ability to laugh is derived from his nature. So Thomas infers then that esse is such that it's distinct from the nature of the thing and from an extrinsic principle from the thing. So that follows from the first premise. And then he says, everything that exists, okay, everything that has esse through another, from some sort of extrinsic principle, is reduced to what exists in itself as to its first cause. Because if it weren't, there would be an infinity of causes. And then that takes in the whole per se ordered series business of causes, which interestingly enough, Thomas doesn't get into in the De Ente, but he gets into elsewhere in his work. And I argued in the book that, look, this per se causal series reasoning is kind of what he's getting at here at this early stage in his career. And so, given that anything that exists through another, per aliud, is reduced to what exists through itself as to a first cause, otherwise you would have an infinity of causes, a per se an ordered series of causes without a primary cause. There has to be some sort of primary cause of esse, of the act of existence, for all other things, because it's pure esse itself. And then this is what Thomas takes God to be. So that's a basic per se of the De Ente argument. That's how he reasons, and that's the context of the reasoning. So with that in place then, should we take it from there, or do you want me to say anything more?
I think that's good. Joe, do you want to present how you understand or approach the De Ente, how you view it?
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for the presentation. It was very lucid and clear, so thank you. So the first thing that I want to say is that, at least for the remainder of the discussion, I'm going to try, I was thinking about how I would approach this discussion, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to try and grant as much of the sort of metaphysical backdrop as I can and see whether or not, once we grant the metaphysical backdrop, still test whether or not the argument, gets up and running and goes through and succeeds. So just because, at least personally, like I've been really ensconced in the analytic tradition within analytic philosophy, and there within that tradition, there are a lot of different conceptions of essence and existence and actuality and so on. And so I think that spending too much time on those, sort of metaphysical backdrop things, I think that would probably take hours upon hours upon hours really to get that sorted out. So I'm going to at least try to grant as much underlying metaphysics as I can. But I just want to flag that for the audience that, there are like hours of discussion to be had on those like sort of preliminary metaphysical points. And so as for my understanding of the argument, I sort of take it as, different thinkers in the tradition have developed it. So I know Paulo Juarez has a paper, and I think it's a 2018 paper. It's on academia.edu. It's something like the argument from motion revisited. Now, I know he talks about different arguments from change, but he also discusses the essence-existence distinction argument. I also, am basing a lot of my understanding off of how other thinkers like Fazer in his Thomistic proof have developed it, and others, as well as it's this whole cauldron, as well as how Gaven Kerr has developed it in some of his work. So basically, yeah, the fundamental starting point is the distinction between essence and existence, right? And so I think the sort of foremost argument is just that for that distinction is that, well, let's just suppose that there were a being in which essence and existence were identical. Well, there could only be one, and hence everything else distinct from that one thing would be such that its essence is distinct from its existence. And so you and I and tables and chairs and trees and things would have an essence distinct from their existence. So in all things but one thing, there is an essence existence distinction if that one thing, of course, turns out to exist. Of course, that's a sort of hypothetical stage. And I know Gaven talks about that sort of hypothetical in his book. So we get the essence existence distinction laid out. And then from there, we argue that, we can level different premises on behalf of this, but essentially we locate the causality of essence and existence, specifically the act of existence, within a per se chain, which is, of course, a sort of wholly derivative instrument, a chain in which the causality of the series is wholly derivative from more fundamental members, or the single most fundamental member. The members have the causality in a wholly derivative way, in an instrumental manner. They don't possess the causality of the series of themselves, as it were. They derive it from some sort of extrinsic source. And so then you proceed, you argue that per se chains cannot go to infinity, and hence there is something which has esse of itself and can impart it to other things without esse being imparted to itself, and that thing would be an essence existent, a thing which is such that its essence is identical to its existence, because per the earlier reasoning, we would argue that something which has an essence distinct from its existence would require a further cause, and hence this thing wouldn't be first after all, right? Because we got to a first member. So that's basically how I understand the line of reasoning. Whether or not it's precisely to a dot, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, what Aquinas specifically said, or what any specific thinker in the tradition has said, that's sort of beside the point. I'm trying to think of like the general thrust of argument that a bunch of different thinkers in the Thomistic tradition have leveled. But I'm perfectly happy to stick with Gavin's favored understanding of the argument. So that's my preliminary.
Yeah, and Gaven, he wanted to clarify some things in the argument, especially from your blog post. So Gaven, is there anything from Joe's presentation here or even in the blog post that you want to address?
Yeah, Joe's presentation here, it gave the general gist of the de Ente argument as it is in de Ente chapter 4, and it seemed to have remained quite close to it. The argument on the blog was quite a distinct argument from the one that was just given there, because the argument on the blog laid out several premises and made several sort of commitments, which Thomas definitely doesn't make in the de Ente, and which are contrary to some of Thomas's thinking in the de Ente. Would you like me to flag those up, or should we leave it at that and stick with what we've put on the table here?
I mean, I think you could flag those up real quick and then see if Joe is actually wants to keep any of those, or believes that maybe maybe there's a more accurate version that Gavin's missing or something like that.
Right. Okay. Well, the opening statement from the blog, just looking at it, is that the de Ente argument relies on a claim that anything with an essence distinct from its existence requires a concurrent per se sustaining cause. No, it doesn't. That's not a claim that it relies on. In fact, the conclusion of the argument, or an inference from the conclusion from the argument, is that the primary cause is a concurrent per se sustaining cause and originator of all things. So, that isn't a claim which is found anywhere in the actual argument itself, and we can go back to the actual argument itself and have a look at it. Looking at the premises then which are laid out, the first premise is if S is such that its essence and existence are distinct, then existence is not essential to S. Well, that needs to be disambiguated. Certainly, if essence and existence are distinct, essence and existence are non-identical. But we don't make the jump to existence is not essential to S unless we get the actual first premise from the de Ente argument. The first premise, recall, is that whatever belongs to a thing is either caused by the principles of its nature, as the capacity for laughter in man, or comes to it from an extrinsic principle, as light in the air from the influence of the sun. So with that premise then, so distinguishing between properties which are derived from the nature of the thing, whereas properties which aren't derived from the nature of the thing, it's with that we can then just say that given the distinction of essence and existence, existence is not a part of the essence or not derived from the essence of the thing. So we need that in place. So the first premise put up as being the first premise of the Ente argument isn't actually the first premise of the argument. Then the second premise, which is certainly the one which was flagged up for me as just not being a premise of the argument at all, is that if F is not essential to S, then S derives F from a concurrent per se cause. Nowhere does Thomas say that. That's just not stated in the argument. I mean, now, I'm aware that Fieser constructs premises like that, but I mean, I would say this to Fieser as well. That's not part of the argument. And I know Fieser, I mean, would say something like, he's constructing a general inspired proof from St. Thomas. He's not actually, seeking to defend Thomas's proof. He calls it the Thomistic proof, but not actually Thomas's proof. Where, I mean, I am concerned in defending the actual proof from St. Thomas because I think it's capable of standing on its own 2 feet. So the concurrency of the cause of Essa, let's say, that's something that we infer from the metaphysics of Essa, but it's not something built into the actual argument itself. Premise 3 just follows from premise 1 and 2. If S is such that essence and existence are distinct, S derives its existence from a concurrent per se cause. Well, okay, if premise 1 and 2 were actually part of the argument, then 3 would follow. But I mean, premise 1 and 2 aren't part of the Ente argument. Chains of per se causes of F must terminate in a primary member that has F non-derivatively. Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's the typical metaphysics of per se causal series, that we get to a primary cause, and then everything else, it is typically following from the earlier premises of the argument. So I think it's important just to note that the first 2 premises of the argument aren't actually, found in Aquinas's argumentation. At least the first one isn't, unless we sort of clarify what we're saying and, put in Aquinas's actual premises, and then the second one definitely isn't found there. There's other bits and pieces through the blog post as well, which are somewhat problematic, especially the understanding of per se causal series, because I note that Joe's presentation here was actually quite a good sort of, gist of per se causal series, things such that they don't have the causality of the series in themselves. But elsewhere in the post, Joe reverts to talking about per se causes, chains of per se causes, rather than a per se ordered series. Because a per se ordered series is not a chain of per se causes. Actually, an accidental or a per accidens ordered series is a chain of per se causes. Fathers producing sons. A father is the per se cause of his son, and the son is the per se cause of his son, and so forth. Whereas a per se ordered series is an ordered series such that the members of the series don't possess the causality of the series in virtue of what they are. And then on the back of that, then you get the argumentation against there being a lack of a primary member, precisely because if there were no primary member, you would have all these things dependent for causality with nothing on which for them to depend. Okay, so I mean, there's a few other wee bits and pieces there, and then I've already mentioned the fact that, Essa isn't accidental to the thing, and it's not predicated accidentally of the thing, and you've got a very clear text from St. Thomas, Commentary on Metaphysics, Book 4, Lecture 1, where he states that. I've got the text here if you want me to, if you're happy to take my word for it, but I've got the text here if you want me to read it. So there's just, a few wee bits and pieces that we can, kick off from.
All right, Joe, what do you think about what Gaven just said? Are you...
No, I'll try to take them in a reverse order, right? So about Essa isn't accidental. So what I meant in that post by accidental was just not essential to the thing. So not belonging to or proper to its essence or its essential principles or what have you. And that does seem to be a central commitment of the sort of Thomistic tradition, right? In things in which essence and existence are distinct, essence does not belong to them, existence does not belong to them essentially, and hence, as I define accidental, all I mean is just that it is not essential, in the sense that it is not essential to them to exist. They do not exist of themselves. So I don't think there's any sort of a misunderstanding there. I think once we disambiguate what I meant by accidental, I didn't mean it's an accident or a sort of predication, an accidental predication. I just mean it is not essential to the thing. And so whenever I mean non-essential, I just use accidental for that. So that's the first thing that I want to say by way of response. The second thing was clarification on the name of per se causes. So I think he is reading in something to what I meant by per se causes that I didn't actually mean. And yes, I could have had a greater specificity or clarification on the blog post with respect to this. But I do think that what I said in and of itself is sort of, it doesn't determine one meaning as opposed to the other. And what I meant by that when I said per se causes is causes located in a chain subordinated per se. So that's what I meant when I said per se causes. Of course, per se just means like of or through itself, or of or through the thing itself, right? And so if it's a chain subordinated per se, well then of course all the members within it that are non-fundamental are not per se causes, because by definition they don't have the causality of the series in and of themselves per se, right? So what I meant when I said a chain of per se causes is not a chain wherein each member is such that it possesses the causality per se. I meant that by per se causes, I meant causes located within a chain subordinated per se. So again, I don't think there's a misunderstanding there. Of course, I could have been, greater clarity within the blog post, and I'll perfectly admit that. I was just typing away like on a YouTube video. So definitely greater clarity. If it were like a philosophy paper, I definitely would have defined terms and so on. So I'm taking these in reverse order. So I know Gaven was saying like, nowhere does a Thomas or Aquinas say that. I would agree with that, right? I mean, like when I was constructing the syllogism, I said the argument would go, I think I used the words something like this. And so I wasn't attributing it to any particular thinker, even Aquinas or Gaven. I was trying to get a sort of general gist of how the argument might be developed from the broader Thomistic tradition and thinkers like Fazer and Juarez, bringing in bits and pieces and so on. If I wanted to like attribute it to Aquinas, I would be like, here is Aquinas's syllogized version of the argument, but I didn't do that. And so I agree that those it's not found, or some of those premises aren't there. Nowhere does Thomas say those things, and so that's fine with me because I'm working sort of in the broader tradition and so on. The next thing I want to say was, as for, I'm taking this in reverse order. I'm just looking at my notes. Derived from the nature. So he took issue or raised a concern. I don't want to say like take issue, but he raised a concern about me saying, something that doesn't have another thing essentially derives it sort of from a concurrent chain of causes subordinated per se. And again, whether or not that comes at the sort of the end of our thinking about the nature of per se chains, or whether it starts at the beginning, I was just trying to get across the general gist of that commitment there. That's the main thing the reason I was trying to include it in there was because of its commitment, whether it comes at the end of a consideration of per se chains and their metaphysical underpinnings, or whether we start with that and then derive some sort of first member. I don't know if that was me. Sorry if you heard that. But yeah, that was my main reason for including that. There was another thing that I wanted to touch on, but my notes are so scribbled that I can't read it. So
I think that's okay. Like Gaven, the main thing that I'm trying to get out of this section is just making sure that both Gaven and Joe, right, have the same understanding of the argument so that we can proceed more efficiently through objections. Mm-hmm. So Gaven, what are your thoughts?
No, thank you for the clarifications. Okay, so, I think good. So, granted then that the blog post isn't addressing the actual de Ente argument. It's addressing how one could take the general sort of metaphysical outlook and construct some sort of argument for God on that basis. And certainly, I certainly detect a very Fazer sort of influence on the way that that's being presented there. That being said, the blog post, is addressing myself and as a reaction to the original sort of podcast that we did with Christopher. Good, to indicate, to grant that it's not addressing the actual de Ente argument, and thus not addressing my actual defense of the de Ente argument. It's addressing a different argument or something, within that sort of family resemblance of it, but not the actual argument that I would defend or the actual argument that Thomas gives. That's good. It's good to clear that up. One of the things then, granted, it's not a philosophy paper, but I do think it's still important to keep the terminology correct and keep things tight, especially when talking about per se ordered chains and per se causes, because they're doing different sort of philosophical work just within Aquinas's general metaphysics. So it is important just to kind of, keep all of that tight. similarly, you know, if I was, you know, engaged in a, I don't know, a discussion, you know, on sort of modal metaphysics, possible worlds, and I started talking about possible worlds as if they were real worlds, in a sense, you know, in some sort of Lewisian sense of, you know, real counterparts or whatever, whereas a, you know, a Kripkean or somebody else could come in and go, oh, no, 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 that's not what we're getting at. I mean, it's just important to keep that tight. I mean, obviously not as tight as a...
Sorry about that.
Obviously not as tight, you know, as a published philosophy paper, but, you know, I mean, tight enough so that we still, you know, still remain just to the argumentation. I mean, one of the things to say just about, I mean, I grant you know, the clarification of what's meant by, you know, accidental. We just mean non-essential or not of the essence of the thing. Okay, so long as we grant that, you know, Thomas never speaks about Essa that way. So if we're, you know, going to engage with Thomas, I mean, personally, I would like to try and engage with Thomas on his own terms, so that if I come to agree or disagree with him, it's Thomas I'm agreeing or disagreeing with. And it's that particular argument that I'm agreeing or disagreeing with, and not something, you know, just inspired or in the ballpark of it. That being said, if we do clarify Essa as accidental, just in the sense of being non-essential, we need then to be sort of attuned to not falling into the trap of thinking, okay, well, Essa is accidental, and then treating it, say, maybe in an objection to the argument, the way we would treat something which genuinely is accidental, such as risability in man, or some sort of, you know, accidental property, quantity-quality relation, or whatever. So I would just put that sort of proviso in that if the so-called accidentality of Essa is just going to be taken to be that it's non-essential, well, then it can't be treated, metaphysically speaking, in the same way that other standard accidents are taken, in which case objections based on standards accounts of, you know, what accidents are like can't, you know, you can't gain any traction in an objection to Essa taken accidental, because the accidentality of Essa would be different from our standard accidents. So I suppose that's all I would have to say about that. Any other thoughts?
No, just quick in response. So, well, one thing that I do want to say is that, well, the post was not, obviously, it wasn't solely a response to you and Tomaszewski. It was also sort of just all my posts and all my videos, really, even if I'm responding to someone, they're educational in general. So I'm trying to educate. That's why I went into so much about, like, the different models of God that you guys didn't talk about. You know, I went into all the different things that, you know, like Kevin Tempe and other philosophers have written on different models of God and things like that. So it was also educational, and in that sense, I wasn't solely addressing what, you know, you and Christopher are saying. I'm also trying to give a more general educational spin on things, and so I think it's at least in my defense legitimate there to bring in things that others have written in a sort of de Ente-like style fashion, just because it's also not just a response to you and Tomaszewski, but also I'm bringing in broader educational pieces for that. So I can agree with you there that, you know, just like just further clarifications, maybe defining terms a little bit more, that definitely would have been proper. And so, yeah, I can totally agree with that. And I know you said it was sort of phaser-esque, and so, you know, I was writing that when I was writing a paper with Api on the Thomistic proof, so of phasers. So I can definitely, you're definitely right that there's a sort of phaserian influence, as it were. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I mean, I was going through your book, Aquinas and the Metaphysics of Creation, the other day, and I was underlining different sections on which I was basing some of the things that I say on the post, because there are different sections in there that seem quite, I don't know, it at least seemed quite clear to my mind that it was saying that because essence and existence are distinct, well then existence would not be sort of essential to it, and that we could like sort of locate that within a per se series. And I know in your first book you start off with the causal principle of whatever belongs to a thing is caused by the principles of it, or by way of an extrinsic causal principle. But I did want to just flag up that some of it was also based on what you've written in your Aquinas and the Metaphysics of Creation. So I can fetch up I can fetch up certain quotes later if it need be, but like for a blog post later. But anyway, that's my main clarification for now. But
so let me just ask, are both sides satisfied with kind of how we understand the argument? Are we ready to move on to some objections and hearing Gavin's defenses?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got the gist of the Ente argument. You know, we've got it out there. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Also, just funny enough, real quick, when my icon of Jesus fell down, I put it on a book about Martin Luther, and then it slipped
All
off.
right.
So never mind. You know, this is Catholic page. Never mind. Joe, let's just hear some objections that you have to the De Ente, and then we'll hear Gavin's response.
Okay, so I'm going to base it primarily off of how he's presented it here. And so one of his first things that he said was whatever belongs to a thing is caused by the principles of its nature or by an extrinsic cause or principle. Now, I guess I would primarily just have to turn it over to him to see further unpacking or further justification for this, because to my mind, at least, it seems as though we don't have to explicitly conceive of this in terms of causation, but we could instead understand it in terms of a sort of explanation, and those two are sort of distinct notions. So I guess I would say whatever belongs to a thing is either explained by the principles of its own nature or is explained by something extrinsic. And also, I would want to just sort of warn against, merely from the fact that it comes from a sort of extrinsic cause or principle. I would warn against taking that to locate that automatically in a sort of concurrent cause, which I know Gavin hasn't done that yet or anything like that, right now. So that's why I just wanted to flag that up right now. So it's mainly asking him for his justification for that one, and sort of disambiguating the cause and the explanation aspect. So we can turn it over to Gavin for that.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I wouldn't divorce causality and explanation the way that you do. So what I would say is that if we're trying to give an explanation of a thing, especially of the distinct properties that it has, we're trying to give an account of the actuality of the thing. And so we have a thing, let's say, we have a man, and man is able to laugh. Well, how is he able to laugh? He has certain he has certain features, certain principles of his nature, without which he would not be able to laugh. That seems to me to be a straight up causal notion, and also an explanation of the capability of laughing. And then we have the other example, which is given in the premise, is you have the illumination of the atmosphere by the sun as from an extrinsic principle. So in that case, you have some sort of feature to do with the atmosphere, something about its actuality, that it would not have were it not for the sun illuminating the atmosphere, or some other principle of illumination. But again, that's both a causal explanation, or that's a causal notion, and it's an explanation.
Yeah. So one reason we might think to divorce these would be by consideration of PSR, sort of universal PSR, that is, everything has an explanation whatsoever. In contrast to everything has a cause whatsoever. So we of course don't want to say that everything has a cause, right? But we might want to say that everything has an explanation, right? So we don't want to say that God's existence, for instance, is utterly inexplicable or unexplained. Presumably God's existence has an explanation, but we wouldn't want to say that God's existence has a cause. And so if God's existence has an explanation but not a cause, well, then these two notions can be divorced, it seems to me. So I guess it's kind of a minor point, but I do want to get this out of the way first, because it might guide some of our further discussion on explaining the essay of a thing, even when the essay is not sort of belonging to it or proper to it, to its essence. So I'll turn over to you what you're thinking about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you say about PSR, universal PSR, I would want to distinguish between some things being intelligible. Okay, so being able to understand it, say, in its actuality, and being able to explain it in its actuality. So I would say that everything is intelligible. There's some sort of conceptual content that we can form by which we can understand a thing. And certainly that's not always causal. Okay, so in the case of God's essence is intelligible, because it's, pure existence itself, the ground of all being, and, all the usual sort of arguments that are given for God's essence being intelligible. But, say, for example, in an essence existence composite, or just in, a particular substance, that substance is intelligible because it has a form. But given the various properties that it has, given its nature, we can give an explanation of that in terms of, causality, say formal, material causality, efficient, final, or whatever. So I would run explanation and causality together in that respect. And so when it comes to the first premise that, a thing has its properties either in respect of its intrinsic principles or on the basis of some extrinsic principle, saying that that's merely intelligible just means that there's some sort of conceptual content by which we can understand that sort of situation. But what is the situation we're understanding? The situation that we're understanding is that, say, a substance in question is able to laugh or is capable of laughter precisely because it has certain features about it without which it would not have those features, and therefore we're into a causal explanation. So intelligibility is not going to be enough without giving an actual account of the metaphysics of the matter, which is done in terms of causal explanation.
No, I think that's very good. Yeah. So I also like to make that distinction between a sort of more epistemic notion of explanation, where it's sort of removing mystery or sort of making it intelligible to the intellect on the one hand, and then on the other hand, sort of a sort of robust, out there ontological account, or bringing into being, or some sort of robust, more ontological as opposed to epistemic notion. So I'm glad we're sort of getting these preliminaries out of the way on the distinction between explanation and how we're conceiving of that in relation to causation. So the next thing that I want to discuss is just to ask for further unpacking or further account of why we are locating esse, or the act of existence, within a per se chain. So I'll turn it over to you. I just think it's really important to understand that, the full thrust of the justification before going into different modes of attacking it. So I'll turn it over to you to give us some flesh to that.
Yeah, okay, good. So the reason why we locate esse as a causal feature within a per se ordered chain is because the metaphysics of the per se ordered chain is such that the members of the chain don't possess the causality of the chain in virtue of what they are. Okay, so they don't possess it essentially. So it's contrasted with per accidens ordered chains. So the classic example of the per accidens one is the fathers producing sons, with the causality of the series being that of paternity or begetting, or so, however you want to cash out what the particular kind of causality that a father has in generating a son, his causal role. By contrast, then, you have the per se order chain, the classic example: the mind moves the hand to move the stick to move the stone, or another one is the fire heats the pot to heat the contents of the pot. And the reason why they're taken to be per se order chains is because the members of those series don't possess the causality of the series in virtue of what they are. So the pot and the contents of the pot, or the hand, the stick, and the stone. The hand, the stick, and the stone don't possess motion simply in virtue of being hands, sticks, and stones. And the pot and the contents of the pot don't possess heat in virtue of being a pot, or being, well, the water in the pot or whatever. Whereas the primary cause in each of those chains does possess the causality of the series in and of itself. So mental agents are things which are able to originate motion, given the sort of things that they are. Fire is the sort of thing which is able to originate the heat, given the kind of thing that fire is. And so esse then is located in per se ordered chains because things which have esse distinct from their essences don't have the causality of esse in virtue of what they are. And so that locates them within a per se ordered chain where esse is the causal property.
Okay, yeah, so that's really what I was trying to get at in the original post, right? So things which are such that their essence is distinct from their existence don't have existence in virtue of what they are, right? So can you help me unpack this inference from the distinction between them to them not having it in virtue of what they are? So that the fact that esse is distinct from their essence, I'm trying to get from that to not having it in virtue of what they are, in virtue of their essence. So could you, I'll turn it over to you for that. I know I'm like turning over to you a bunch, but it's really helpful to really nail down these sort of justifications in order to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, so that's the first premise of the Ente argument. So just to go back to the first premise of the argument, whatever belongs to a thing is either caused by the principles of its nature, as capacity for laughter in man, or comes to it from an extrinsic principle, as light in the air from the influence of the sun. So we're looking at esse now. And so esse, Aquinas reasons, isn't caused by the principles of the essence of the thing because it's distinct from the essence of the thing. If it were caused by the principles of the essence of the thing, then the essence would have to exist before it has existence from which the existence would be derived. So it's not derived from the essence of the thing in the way that derisability is derived from man's essence, let's say, his rational animality. Man can pre-exist, his capacity for laughter. That capacity for laughter is something that comes about in virtue of being a rational animal. But esse isn't something that comes about in virtue of having an essence, given the distinction between essence and existence, because that would mean then that the essence would have to some way pre-exist the actual existence that it has. And this sort of takes in Thomas's rejection of what in 20th century Thomism was called the thick essences view of essence, that, you know, essences kind of, you know, they pre-exist their existence, they just don't have enough existence, they have to be topped up with something more, which is esse. Thomas, you know, he rejects that view, he locates it in the Latin Avicenna. And it was a view very popular just after Thomas's death, was the distinction between the esse that the essence has prior to its having existential esse. And it's also a view that can be found in the German philosopher Meinong. You know, Meinong distinguishes between, you know, objects which simply subsist, they have Bestand, and objects which actually exist, they have Existenz. So Thomas isn't going to take any of that. The essence is just nothing prior to its actual existence, in which case existence can't flow from the principles of the essence, it can't come from the essence, in which case it has to come from some sort of extrinsic principle, given the distinction between essence and esse.
No, that's good. Again, for the audience, I guess I'm just trying to sort of really hammer down the sort of the interworkings between the different premises and so on. So, so I guess there are two different ways that I might take. I'm just drawing a little diagram on for myself. There are two different ways I might take this. As one is a sort of non-theistic way, and then the other one is a sort of neoclassical theist, or sort of a modified classical theist or theistic personalist way, as a way of responding to this. So I'm not sure which one I'll pick first, but I'll just take the second one. So what a modified classical theist would probably say is just that, okay, well, hold on a second. So while in God, right, and when I mean God now, I'm speaking of the sort of neoclassical God, not the sort of God of Aquinas and different thinkers in the classical theistic tradition. What they're probably going to say in response is they're going to say, well, while essence is distinct from existence in God, the two are such that they are necessarily conjoined with one another, right? Because God is under their understanding, God is a metaphysically necessary being, and he accounts for why there are the contingent things that there are everything apart from himself. So at least putting my non-classical theist hat on, my neoclassical theist hat on, you know, what I would probably say if I were a neoclassical theist, I'd probably say, well, you know, while they are distinct in God, you know, they're sort of necessarily conjoined, as it were. And I do think that metaphysical necessity, or something's being metaphysically necessary, is at least some sort of explanation, or at least can be, for why something obtains. So like, why do 1 and 1 make 2? Well, it's just metaphysically necessary that 1 and 1 make 2. Or like, why is 1 identical to 1? Well, you know, ultimately, it seems as though we're going to bottom out in metaphysical necessity. And so that's one way that a sort of neoclassical theist might respond to this. And so I guess that might target the premise that whatever belongs to a thing is either caused by the principles of the nature of the thing, right? Because God's nature doesn't like cause God's existence to be, but it's not coming by way of a sort of extrinsic cause or principle. It's rather explained in virtue of the metaphysical necessity of its obtaining. And so I'm wondering what you would think about that sort of neoclassical theist response to this.
Yeah, okay, good. So that neoclassical, you know, view that you just articulated. So you spoke of essence and esse, the conjunction of the two in God, and so there was a talk of them being conjoined in some sort of way. Whereas Thomas is very clear, and you know, I would defend him in this. Essence and esse are composed as potency and act. So it's a composition of act and potency. So you have some sort of principle of actuality actuating a potency. Without which principle of actuality, the potency just would remain potency. So in the case of essence stands to esse as potency to act, and so they're composed and not simply conjoined. So again, essence and esse aren't being viewed in the creature as two distinct things. So this is back to what I said at the beginning. It's not, you know, a res and res, essence and esse. That's actually something like the Avicennian view, which Thomas is very keen to deny. Essence and esse are composed as potency and act in the thing. So given that they're composed as potency and act, one is the principle of actuality and the other is the principle of potency. In which case, when we get to God, then God's, Thomas reasons, well, at the end of the day, Ente, Thomas just describes God as esse tantum, just pure esse. And throughout his work, he refers to God as ipsum esse subsistens, self-subsisting esse, or just esse itself, or that whose essence is its existence. to speak of essence and esse as in some way sort of composed in God, well, for Thomas, that would make God some sort of creature, because it means he would be subject to a principle of actuality, whereas God just is esse itself, which is the act of all acts. So I think there's going to be a deeper disagreement there with the neoclassical theist on the metaphysics of the matter prior to the actual argument getting off the ground. So if we grant, Thomas's metaphysics, the argument gets off the ground. So the neoclassical theist might want to have to attack the whole act potency distinction and the notion of composition that goes with it.
No, yeah, that is good, because well, they might say that existence isn't a sort of actuating of a potency, or it's not a sort of actualizing of a potency, but it's rather the actuality of something. And I guess, they might try to say, like, well, something can be, I guess, actual without thereby somehow there being some sort of actualizing or actuating. Again, I'm just putting on my neoclassical theist hat, and I'm not a neoclassical theist, but that might be how they try to respond. So in God, the essence wouldn't sort of stand as potency to an actuating principle. Rather, the essence would sort of be wholly and already, as it were, actual, and it would be like not purely actual. They're not going to say like God's pure actuality simpliciter, because then they're not a neoclassical theist. But they would probably say that at least God's essence is such that it is like wholly actual. He might have different accidental features, but his essence is not actuated by anything. It's not sort of actualized, but it has actuality in a sort of I guess, a robust, metaphysically necessary manner. And so what do you think about that distinction between actualizing a potency versus the essence is not standing as potency to an actualizing principle, but merely a principle of actuality? What do you think about that proposal?
Yeah. So Thomas's view on act and potency and essence and esse is not that, the principle of actuality is an actualizing principle. And this is because it's the efficient cause which is doing the actualizing, and the principle of actuality then actualizes, or by being composed in the thing, is a principle of act by which the thing is actual, but it's the efficient cause which is sort of doing the actualizing. So if you take, sort of the example of matter and form is the sort of principle of actuality by which matter, is, this kind of thing rather than that kind of thing. So the form of the statue of David is just, say the shape of the statue of David, whereas the matter is the marble. The form isn't sort of doing anything in the sense of actualizing. That's what Michelangelo was doing and giving the thing the form. So it's the cause which is doing the ing bit, it's the actualizer. But there's a principle of act which is in the thing which actuates the potency of the matter, and that's the form. So when the artist, in this case, it's an artifact. When the artist isn't there, the thing is still, the statue of David. Okay, because it has that principle of actuality in it, which is the form. So as an Inertial, how's that?
No, I do think that's good. So do you make a distinction between actuating and actualizing? I just want to ask if you make a distinction there.
Between actuating and actualizing? Other than, just a handy way of talking about how, the cause works. I can't see any sort of real reason to, I can't see a way of motivating a distinction there.
Okay, so when you're talking about the relation of esse and essence, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning how the esse is sort of actuating the potency of the essence. So I'm just trying to bridge this how you were talking about in the Michelangelo case. So you were saying that Michelangelo is of course the actualizer, and then the form is also an actualizer of the prime matter of the potency, or how would you conceive of I guess of the relation between the form and the matter as because it sounds like you were hinting at the form is sort of actuating the potency of prime matter, and then which is another way of saying that it's actualizing it, but then on the flip side, that Michelangelo was actualizing maybe the composite object. I'm not trying to level an objection. I'm just trying to understand further the view. So could you help unpack this further?
Yeah. So the form isn't going to actuate the matter unless you have some sort of efficient cause to give form to matter. But if there is no form to give, then the matter is not actuated. So if Michelangelo didn't have an idea of what he wanted to carve, which was the form of the thing, then the block of marble would have just remained whatever block of marble that it was that he had to carve the statue. So the form actuates the matter in virtue of the efficient cause putting it to work to actuate the matter. So in the case of essence and esse then, esse is a principle of actuality by which the thing exists and is composed with the essence in the thing, but it requires some sort of cause in order to be present in the thing. And that cause then is what does the sort of the actuating or the actualizing. It does the work, it does the lifting to give esse to essence.
Okay, yeah, that helps make sense of it. So I did say at the beginning that I would try to grant as much as the sort of underlying metaphysics as I could and see if I could push it. But I guess the neoclassical theist might say, and again, I'm going down this route of the neoclassical theist, at least for now. Maybe later we'll get to my sort of non-theistic route. But this route is, I wonder if they're going to now start challenging, like, why should we conceive of essence as standing in potency to existence? And again, like, even if they would grant that there's some sense in which something's essence, like the neoclassical theistic God's essence, is distinct from its existence, they might still say, like, well, why would we conceive of this as a sort of potency act relationship, as opposed to some other kind of, I mean, they're probably going to bring in a sort of relational ontology or other understanding, maybe exemplification relation or what have you, to existence. So they might now start pressing, like, why should we conceive of God's essence as a potency that stands to some further actual principle or principle of actuality, or actualizing principle or what have you. So maybe I can turn it over to you. I know it's a big topic, of course, but I do think that that's probably where they're going to take it now. They're just going to take it to the underlying metaphysics. So I'll turn it over to you for that one.
Yeah, okay. So why would we conceive of essence as standing in potency to esse? Well, pretty much because if essence didn't have esse, essence wouldn't be. It would be nothing. And that's a clear-cut, example of causality right there. So the essence stands in potency to esse as act, because without the essence would just be nothing at all.
Yeah. Okay, so that helps. So I agree that it, like, were it not in existence, it would be precisely nothing, right? I mean, we're gonna reject that sort of Meinongian view, but like, why is it in particular standing in potency to the existence, or to the sort of actualizing principle? I guess they would say, like, the essence without existence would be nothing, but by itself, it seems, at least conceptually, they might say by itself that doesn't seem automatically to entail that it stands as a potency to be actuated. So what do you think about that sort of inference there?
So I didn't say that it stands as a potency to be actuated. That would be the Meinongian view. That would be the Latin Avicenna view. And Thomas never says that, essence stands there as a potency waiting to be actuated. That's the thick essence's view.
That was a lack of clarity in my language. I just mean once the essence is actual, and the substance is an actual thing, the essence, as it were, corresponds to potency, and the act of existence corresponds to actuality. So that was a loose way of speaking.
Yeah. So, I mean, we distinguish between act and potency when we, look and ask ourselves, what is it without which the thing wouldn't be, say X, Y, or Z? And so that without which it wouldn't be X, Y, or Z is the cause. And then its being X, Y, and Z stands as effect to that cause in order to be X, Y, or Z. So you take an example that Thomas gives of the atmosphere being illuminated by the sun. Were it not for the sun, the atmosphere wouldn't be illuminated. So the atmosphere, in being illuminated, stands as potency to the sun as cause of illumination. So were it not for the esse in the creature simply would not be, in which case the esse stands to the essence of the creature as, act of potency by which the thing is.
Yeah. Oh, there's a bit of echo there or something, or feedback. But so now they might take issue with this sort of conception of a sort of conception of causation, right? So you were saying how it's sort of that without which it wouldn't be. So at least, so that almost seems like, right? That almost says like that seems like we're saying that, well, if the thing didn't obtain, if X didn't obtain, then Y wouldn't obtain. That is to say, X is that without which Y wouldn't be. That seems to mean, at least in my mind, that if X didn't obtain, then Y wouldn't obtain. Maybe I mix those up, but that seems to be what you're saying. But then once we take that account, I mean, that seems to have perhaps some counterexamples. Maybe, I mean, that without which another thing wouldn't be. I mean, if we take something that's impossible, like if we have an impossible antecedent, then we can derive anything, right, in the consequence. So if we say, if X didn't obtain, where X is like 1 + 1 = 2, well then of course it would trivially follow that if 1 + 1 weren't 2, then I wouldn't exist, because that follows upon the antecedent, right? But we wouldn't want to say that 1 + 1 being 2 is a sort of cause of me. So I don't know, I guess I'm trying to understand how you're analyzing or understanding causation, because at least to my mind, that without which it wouldn't be, we're going to need some further condition or some further understanding as to how this corresponds to causation.
Yeah, sure. So when we look, when we're looking for a cause, we're looking amongst effects and we're trying to determine them as effects. And then we ask, well, what is it without which they wouldn't have this or that feature in question? And then that lets us infer that there is a cause by which it has that feature, such as the sun's illuminating the atmosphere. That isn't the same as saying that, or it's not exactly the same as saying, well, if this didn't obtain, then that wouldn't obtain, because there's no necessity, or there doesn't have to be a necessity on a cause to act on the thing. All we're saying is that when we have a sufficient account of effects, we can infer a cause for those effects. That's all we're saying.
Okay, I do think that helps. I mean, I still think that they're going to get trapped, or they're not trapped, but I think they're going to get really caught up with this underlying account of causation, and conceiving of it in this manner, right? That without which it wouldn't be, because I don't know. Just thinking in terms of, like, again, my neoclassical theist hat, like, yeah, I mean, if we're sort of speaking of existence loosely, I mean, of course, God wouldn't be were he not to exist, but it seems as though, I don't know, they're probably not going to resist understanding causation as that without which it wouldn't be. So I don't know, I guess maybe we can, I'll turn it over to you for a response to that, and maybe we can go down that other path for the non-theistic path, because again, like I said, I wanted to try and grant as much as the underlying metaphysics as I could. And it sounds like the neoclassical theist is just going to butt heads with the metaphysics. That's what it sounds like with me. So I'll turn it over to you for that last point. Yeah,
real quick too, just to add something. If I remember, Gavin, you didn't just say were it not like you said, why would not have something or have that by virtue of, you had that by virtue of part there, and I'm wondering if that's relevant. So it's not just, if X doesn't obtain, then Y doesn't obtain, but there's an actual relationship that was meant to be there that kind of got dropped in the discussion. Is that relevant?
Yeah. I mean, that's all part and parcel of the sort of metaphysics of act and potency and the causality that follows from that we're getting into. But I think Joe is right that we're going to butt heads not on the actual argument for God that we're looking at, but the metaphysics which informs the argument. I mean, and one of the longest chapters of the 2015 book was on defending that metaphysics of causality within a post-Humean, post-Kantian, 20th century analytic sort of way of thinking. So, I mean, I think that's kind of a good place to kind of point out where the disagreement lies. It is over that act-potency relation as influencing the account of causality, which is coming up there. And then obviously it seems that, sort of the non-thomistic theist is, just not going to have that account of act and potency. So, my advice then to Joe then, would be to go after the act potency distinction and the account of causality, which comes out of that. How's that sound?
Or I guess not necessarily the act potency distinction, but how the two relate to one another is sort of how I was getting at with that sort of the causation thing that I was talking about. But I think that would be a bridging point to talk about the sort of non-theistic route, because I do agree that the non-classical theist will probably just say, or probably you'd probably have to sort of butt heads with the underlying metaphysics, the account of causation. What do we really mean by this in virtue of relation, and that without which it wouldn't be, and so on. So I do agree with that. So I'll table that for now, and then I'll move on to the non-theistic sort of responses. So I'll take off my neoclassical theist hat. I'll put on my non-theist hat now. So I'm wondering if the non-theist could say, well, okay, so what if I grant that, okay, whatever belongs to a thing is caused by the principles of that thing, or sorry, either if something belongs to a thing, either it's caused by the principles of that thing or by an extrinsic cause or principle or account, right? So what if they granted that, but then they said, okay, well then we can account for the, let's say the present existence of something. I'm just picking the present for, for ease, because, Aquinas is talking about any moment at which something exists. So I'll just pick the present for ease. So what if we can say that, so existence is not accounted for or explained or caused in virtue of the principles of the thing in and of itself, its nature. But what if we can account for existence not in terms of a causal chain subordinated per se, but in terms of something else? So what if we would, in my paper with Oppie on the Thomistic proof, we give, again, now I'm getting into sort of existential inertia. We give 3 different accounts maybe of existential inertia after defining it. So one of them was a sort of, I think we called it an earlier account. So according to the earlier account, the present existence of some temporal or concrete substance, well, I guess I won't say present. At time t, the existence of some temporal concrete object S at t is explained in virtue of one, the state in existence of S immediately prior to t, in conjunction with there being no sufficiently destructive causal factors. And so I guess we could try to account for the essay of S at t in virtue of some immediately temporally prior cause of that essay, and perhaps that would be either S at that immediately prior moment, that causes S at this posterior moment, at this exact moment. And so that would be our first account, the earlier account. And so that I know people who are know about the philosophy of time, or their flags are going up in their minds, because they're going to think well, hold on a second, that sounds like you're adopting discrete time. What if time's continuous? We discussed that in the paper, but I think that's probably beyond present purposes. So that was the first account. We gave 2 other accounts. I won't give those right now because that would be a little bit bombarding you, I think. So what do you think about that that way that someone might, again, we don't adopt any particular one of these accounts, but what do you think about that way that someone might argue that, okay, I grant that whatever belongs to a thing is caused either by the principles of its nature or something else, but that something else isn't in terms of a sort of concurrent per se cause, but instead in terms of the immediately temporally prior state and existence of the thing. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm really glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that's in your paper with Oppie. I hope that gets published. I've got a paper forthcoming on existential inertia, and you're probably aware yourself of the lack of kind of literature in the area, in the whole area, and so you kind of have to reconstruct the whole position. Other than Bedouin and Audi and a few others, there's not much. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the constructions, interpretations of the inertia objection that I gave was precisely something like that a thing's present, existence is explained by its previous existence. And so long as that there's no, it's not that it exists because something is acting to cause it to exist, it's rather its ceasing to exist is brought about as something which, as an engagement of causality. I think Bedouin makes that point in his paper. So I'm glad you brought it up. It kind of, resonates with a position and interpretation that I gave of it in my forthcoming paper. Yeah, so, what do I think about that? Well, I think that for that objection to work, we would have to deny the distinction between essence and essay, or at least conceive of essence and essay in a way that, somebody who wants to defend Thomas is going to resist. Because essay is the act of all acts, without which there would be nothing. The essence would literally be nothing without essay. So the essay doesn't subsist in the essence. Remember, essence and essay aren't objects with one subsisting in the other. So essay isn't like, say, a color property subsisting in the thing, and the reason why it subsists is because the thing remains subsisting. It would be more proper to say something like the essence exists precisely because it subsists in the essay that it has, or Thomas uses the language of participation. The essay, or the essence participates in its essay, and that's Thomas's Neoplatonism coming out. So with regard to that existential inertia objection, sure, we can look at a thing and say, well, look, the status quo is that the thing continues to exist. And we might be tempted to say that the reason why it ceases to exist, the reason why that status quo is interrupted, is because an interruption has occurred by some sort of causal influence. But what the Thomas is going to say is you only have that status quo because you have esse, and the essence has esse from without. So at any point at which the essence has esse, it doesn't have it and the esse becomes attached to it the way two Lego bricks would get attached. Again, that would be the thick essence's view of esse. It has it precisely because at any moment that the essence that exists, it's participating in its active existence, which if it did not participate in it, it would be nothing. So if there were not some sort of cause granting esse to the thing would simply cease to be. The thing is naturally nothing. So without something to give esse to it, it would revert to nothingness. So it's not that there has to be some sort of cause at some point which causes the thing to cease to be. It's rather that for any moment that the thing exists, it has its esse from some sort of cause. And so that's why, that sort of comes out of the whole metaphysics of essence and esse. So the Thomist is going to, again, we're going to get down to a disagreement on the metaphysics here.
No, I think that's really good, and I'm glad you're talking about that in your paper. So that I'm looking forward to reading that. Well, depending on how much time I have, I might write a response, but we'll see. So what I'm thinking is, what if the inertialist is going to respond by saying, well, I agree that it would the essay at the essay or the active existence of S at T would have to have a cause, right? So we're not saying that, okay, it just subsists and it persists in existence without without requiring some sort of sustainer. What if we said instead that it does have to have a cause, but the cause is in terms of something that is immediately temporally prior, something which does have esse immediately temporally prior, and that could be, for instance, the inertialist might say S, the thing that we're considering. So S at T's existence, right, is in fact caused, right? It is in fact caused. It does have an extrinsic principle by which it exists, but that extrinsic principle is just simply not a concurrently acting one. It is one that is immediately temporally prior, which is such that it acts to bring it about that this thing exists at the next moment, and it is in virtue of that it exists at this present moment. And of course, this does raise the question about, well, what about the existence of the thing immediately temporally prior? Like, well, we have to account for the being of that. But then the inertialist would probably say, okay, well, we're just going to keep on explaining it back and back until we reach, for instance, the beginning of the existence of something, in which case we have to advert some sort of cause extrinsic to the whole substance to bring it into being. So what do you think about that sort of line of response that would agree with you that it requires a cause, but that cause is not located in terms of some extrinsic sustainer, but in terms of the immediately temporally prior state existence of that?
So again, we're outside of the metaphysics of esse there. That's treating essence and esse as if they were two distinct things or two separate things, so that when you have the immediately temporally prior cause, it gives existence to this thing. Then the immediately temporally prior cause, S, that just fizzles out, and you have the thing with its esse. But now we're thinking of essence and esse as two distinct things which are somehow conjoined together like Lego blocks or something like that. And the essence will continue to carry this esse with it until it's separate, until the two are separated. But that's certainly not how Thomas thinks of the relationship between essence and esse, because Thomas thinks of the relationship between essence and esse is that esse is the act of all acts. It's a principle of actuality without which the essence would not be. So the creature would simply not be without that principle of actuality, which is esse. And given that the essence doesn't have it in virtue of what it is, the essence would be nothing were it not to have that active existence, but it can't have it of itself, in which case it needs to have it from some sort of cause at any moment that it has it, otherwise it just would revert to being nothing. So if you had something that brought on Thomas's metaphysics, if you had something which brought an essence into existence and then stopped in its causal activity, the essence would immediately cease to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. So my proposal really wasn't that it sort of carries on until it's separated as a sort of a, like the Lego blocks thing. I think rather it's that, no, it's not as though it carries on. It's that it's precisely S at T does have a cause of its esse. S at T does have a cause of its esse, and it is receiving it, as it were. But that from which it receives it is the immediately temporally prior, is an immediately temporally prior cause, namely it could be S or S's state in existence at T or something, or at some time immediately prior to T. And so Yeah, it doesn't strike me that this account is saying that existence sort of carries on with the essence until it's separated. No, I mean it's precisely granting that the essence of S at T does participate in the act of existence. Moreover, the act of existence is in fact caused at T. It's just that is caused at T doesn't require that the cause is concurrently acting at T. It could be immediately prior. It could be the state in existence immediately prior. And it does seem at least coherent, at least in principle. Many people think this, that, previous things, can exercise causal activity so as to influence later things. Well, I'll just turn it over to you for that. So I don't think it relies, again, I'm just summarizing it. I don't think it relies on existence carrying on until it's separated. I do think it's still granting that it is a cause. It's just that the cause, which is a cause of S's existence at T, which it's just in terms of something that is like immediately temporally prior. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think the one who would object to the inertialist objection is going to say, is going to deny that, something that, at an earlier state of a thing's existence, carries forth. We're just saying that with regard to essence and esse, that's not the case, given, the special status of the metaphysics of esse. So, I mean, that's the first thing I'm going to say to that. So the second thing then is that if you do grant that the esse that a thing has at any T that it has it requires a cause, where is the inertial hypothesis then? Because if the esse that a thing has is caused at any T that it has it, well, that just seems to be the case, that it needs a cause for its esse at any moment that it exists.
Yeah. So the inertial thesis would be how Oppie and I formulate it. It's a continuously concurrent sustaining cause that is extrinsic to the substance in question. So the cause of S at T would be something, in order to violate the inertial hypothesis, it would have to be something that is a sort of continuously concurrent sustaining cause extrinsic to S. So it would have to be like S star or something, right? But if we're saying that it does in fact have a cause, but it's simply the immediately temporally prior state in existence of S, for instance, then that's not a continuously concurrent extrinsic sustaining cause of S in terms of some S star. Rather, it's still in terms of S, and the explanatory framework that we're using doesn't advert anything beyond S. We just look at the different, I guess, temporal slices, as it were, of S along its existence, and there are sort of intra-S relations of causation and explanation between that. So that's really, I do think it does preserve the inertial thesis. And then I forget your first point. I think you're talking about the metaphysics of esse in your first point. My notes, I can't read them right. They're too scribbled when you were mentioning that. So what was your point about the metaphysics of esse and how that wouldn't really go along with what I've sketched just now?
Okay, well, so we'll get to that. It seems then that if a thing that exists and has esse and it has its esse caused by S at T, either the esse, just attaches to the essence of the thing, S drops out, and the thing continues to exist, in which case we have the Lego blocks, have a Senian sort of view of essence and esse, which is Thomas is going to reject, or S, or whatever sort of cause you want, is going to have to cause the esse of the thing at any T that the thing exists. So it's one or the other. And if you do have a cause for the esse at any point at which the thing exists, well then, that's Thomas, that's Thomism, because you have the essence participating in its active existence, which it derives from a primary cause. The only thing Thomas will deny is that it's temporally prior. He'll say that, the primary cause is, metaphysically prior or more fundamental or, per se.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. So there might be a slight ambiguity here with the immediately temporally prior thing just dropping out, right? So it really wouldn't be that it just drops out of the picture, but it would instead be that its causal operation is still such that it has the effect at T, even though if it were presentists, even though the S immediately temporally prior no longer exists, it is such that its causal influence and that activity that it exercised or whatever still has its effect right here, right now. And so it's not as though it's sort of dropping out. And I think this goes to a more fundamental distinction between something's being caused at t versus something's being caused by something which exercises such causal power at t, right? So S, at least in principle, we can detach these. So like S at t might be caused, but we have to distinguish between that cause operating at t to cause S at t versus that cause operating at some other time so as to bring about S at t, right? So I do think that well, I don't think the inertialist would automatically agree under this first account that I've sketched. I don't think they're going to automatically agree that S in some sense drops out and the essay just sort of carries on until it's separated.
Mm-hmm.
It's that
Mm-hmm.
it's that even if we're presentists and that immediately temporally prior thing doesn't exist, the causal effect, that which it explains, is still present. Like that is something that's like in the razor's edge present right now. So I think that would be probably their like riposte to what you said there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, I mean, that grants the Thomas case then, because if the causal operation of the cause S is required for the thing to continue to exist, then that grants exactly what Thomas is saying, that were it not for the causal activity of some cause, the thing would not exist. Thomas is just going to say that, well, yeah, that's what the cause of Essa is doing. Without the cause of Essa granting Essa to the thing at any moment that it exists, or S, the causal operation of S having a causal influence on the thing so that the thing continues to exist, the thing would just not be. It would be nothing. So I don't see how that's any different from the Thomas view, aside for the temporally prior bit. Thomas is going to reject the temporally prior bit because he's thinking in terms of metaphysical priority. So it seems that grants the Thomas case.
Well, see, I don't think it does grant the Thomas case, because the cause, which the causal operation is acting at t, or it's having its effect at t, right? The causal operation, I mean, it's still in terms of the immediately temporally prior state in existence of S, which is itself an essence existence composite.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not really locating this within a series that. It seems to me we're not locating this within a series that would terminate in something which is just pure essay. Instead, we're just locating it in the immediately temporally prior state, and since it's an essence existence composite that's persisting, we're going to have a cause for that in terms of the immediately temporally prior state, and we're sort of backtracking until we get to the first moment, for instance, of S's existence, and then it's just sort of causing in theory, or whatever it is. I forget which. I forget the distinction between those two, which one corresponds to which. But it's a cause of becoming as opposed to a cause of being at the first moment of its existence, and then at each subsequent moment there are these sort of intra-temporal causal relations that account for it. So I don't really see how it's granting the Thomist case.
Yeah, so it grants the Thomas case when it comes to the metaphysics of essence and essay, such that without the causal activity of something to give essay to the essence would simply not be. So I mean, if you grant that you have some sort of cause, the causal operation of which is necessary for the thing to exist, that's simply what the Thomist is holding. Now, where we do differ then is the denial that essay is some sort of causal feature within a per se ordered series. But we've already seen the justification for essay being a causal feature in some per se ordered series. So it seems then what you have to do is you have to deny that essay is a causal property within per se ordered series and hold that it's a member of some different sort of ordered series. But that's the very sort of argumentation that the Thomist presses against the inertial objection, that the metaphysics of per se ordered series and the metaphysics of essence and essay is what overcomes the inertial objection. So if the inertialist is going to say that, well, look, we can secure existential inertia if we deny per se order series and we deny the metaphysics of essay, well, of course you can. But the metaphysics of essay and the metaphysics of per se series is there precisely to meet the existential inertia objection. So you need to reject the metaphysics of per se series and the metaphysics of essence and essay to do that.
Yeah, so by way of response, and I do want to maybe touch on another account of existential inertia that we give, because again, I'm only going over the one account that we give out of like 3 or maybe even more in our paper. But this one, I don't think that we're still bottoming out in that the metaphysics of the per se series, because we have to distinguish. Now we sort of have to index what we're trying to explain at times, right? So we have S at t, right? So we're trying to explain S at t. Now, we have at least tentatively granted, right, or I guess hypothetically granted, or the inertialist has, that S doesn't have existence by the principles of its own nature at t. So again, we're indexing at times. And it does have it by way of an extrinsic cause. But then we're just going to have to look at S at t prime, or I'm going to say t negative 1. Okay, t negative 1, right? And then that thing is going to be such that S at t, right, index to S at t, that S at t negative 1 would, in some sense, with S at t, if we're just focusing right here, if we're indexing our verbs to at t, it would be the case at t, right? I know this is very difficult to explain, but it would be the case with S at t that something else does have the causality of the series in virtue of itself, as it were, right? Because immediately prior, it does in fact have that causal property, and it's bestowing that causal property to S at t, right? And so although S at t doesn't have the causal property of itself, in some sense, S at t has the causal property from something that does have it of itself right here. But then go back to here, right? Index to this time, the immediately prior time does have the causality of the series of itself because it was brought into existence, as it were. And therefore, it's not really giving what it doesn't have to give. It sort of already has it. And then go back to here, well, then index to this time, t negative 1, right? At that time, it doesn't have the causal power of the series, right? And then it derives it from something that does have it, which is namely t negative 2, right? And so then we're sort of pushing it back. And so I don't think ultimately, it's sort of, we have to index under this account, again, under this account of inertia, we have to index the possessing the property, if we could say property, the property of possessing the causality of the series. We have to index that at times, and it's going to vary at different times. I think that's what the inertialist is going to be saying here. And that's a very complicated, I know I explained it horribly, and I'm just trying to defend this first account of existential inertia. There are other ones, and I know we're like almost at 4:30, so so I'll turn it over to you to talk about that objection.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, it sounds like it'll be a great paper to get, to read and go through. So, I mean, it seems to me that, if at some earlier point, you grant that there is a cause which has the causality of the series in virtue of what it is, and the causality that we're talking about is Essa, then that thing, essentially has Essa, or that thing is essentially Essa then. And well, I mean, where's the difference now with Thomism? Because once we arrive at some sort of cause, which, whose essence is its Essa, well then anything other than that which has Essa is derived from it. So it seems that we've arrived at, God as pure Essa itself as soon as you grant something which has the causality of Essa in virtue of what it is. And so there's no prior to that, which is the cause of that, because if, it has Essa in virtue of what it is, there's nothing to which it stands in potency.
Yeah, well, we're indexing it to times, right? So at the particular time, it doesn't have it of itself, but then let's say at the immediately posterior time, something else would, right? So I don't, we have to, under this account of inertial persistence, right? We're going to have to index it to time. So we can't just say full stop simpliciter that it has the causality of the series of itself, and hence it wouldn't like full stop simpliciter be the case. But we're sort of indexing it at times. And I know we're getting we're getting quite deep into the I guess this account of persistence, and there are other ones, and we're probably too much out of time to get into the other two.
Well, so Alan, you're in charge. I mean, I could say something to that, but I suppose it's not fair on Joe that he hasn't had the paper isn't available, for his to compare to. But I mean, I'm happy to reply to that if you like. Or
you can reply to that, and then you can have the last word. I'm totally fine with that. You can have the last word because we're coming up on about an hour and a half, and that's unfortunately when I said we had to kind of get it going. So I'll let you have the last word. That's perfectly fine with me. And yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, that sounds good. Gavin, take it away.
Yeah. It seems to me that if we do arrive at some sort of cause which has the causality of the series, i.e. Essa, in virtue of what it is, there's no earlier point then that we can get to. Or if you are going to say that you can get to an earlier time, where it doesn't have the Essa of itself, well, we're way outside of Thomistic metaphysics now. So again, it's not the inertial objection per se, it's the metaphysics of the matter which would give rise to the inertial objection, or, you know, lead to its denial. So again, it's the metaphysics that we disagree on. Yeah, so I mean, that's what I would say to that, you know, that the inertial objection stands or falls on one's underlying metaphysics. Now, you know, you're saying, you know, in your paper that, you know, you motivate it, you know, you do out all the groundwork, brilliant, you know, that'll be something to have a read of. For a last word, thank you for giving me some sort of insight into your research, and, you know, hopefully your forthcoming publications, you know, that'll be fun to engage with. And, you know, yeah, thanks for everything this evening.
All right, thank you for just a wonderful discussion. Once again, Gaven, Kerr, and Joe Schmid. Apologies when I came in during the middle of the debate and I tried to ask a question, then I realized, like, oh wait, the question was framed wrong. So sorry about that. I'm really thankful to just be here with, you know, two great thinkers. Joe, do you want to say anything before we go, or are you satisfied?
No, I just want to say thank you both. That was so fun. That was wonderful. You know, it is a little bit sad that we couldn't get into, like, you know, well, the underlying metaphysics, of course, but I did want to, like, see how far we could push it without that, and, like, granting as much as I could, because that I think that's valuable in its own right. And then, yeah, you know, the other accounts of existential inertia and so on. But as he said, we'll just, like, wait for the papers and so on. So I do want to say thank you both so much. I really appreciated it and so much. Yeah, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.